Bonjour à tous, installez-vous. Je m'appelle Alain Bosetti, je suis le président du salon. Avant de laisser la parole à Caroline Castet, qui est là, qui est la directrice de la rédaction de Capital, rédactrice en chef seulement, me dit-elle. Elle n'est pas encore directrice de la rédaction, mais ça ne saurait tarder. Il n'y a pas de témoin. Et Marcy Albauer, je voudrais juste vous prendre la parole une minute. En 2008, sorry, I speak in French, Marcy, but you know the story. En 2008-2009, j'ai lu un article dans un magazine qui s'appelle Fast Company sur les slashers. Je ne connaissais pas ce terme de slasher. Et c'était à l'occasion sur un livre qui s'appelle One Person, Multiple Careers. Et j'ai trouvé ça vraiment extrêmement intéressant. Je ne sais pas si vous connaissez tous le terme uberisé. Hein. Le terme uberisé a été créé par Maurice Lévy, qui est le chairman de Publicis. C'est lui qui a pris la marque Uber pour en faire un substantif uberisé. De même que freelance, je ne sais pas si vous le savez, c'est un écrivain anglais qui s'appelle Sir George Walter Scott, qui est dans Ivanhoe, a pris pour la première fois le mot freelance. Et donc il y a des gens qui mettent des mots sur des réalités. Et dans ce livre, donc slash, c'est le nom en anglais de la barre oblique sur le clavier. Et une journaliste, une essayiste qui s'appelle Marcy Albauer, qui a écrit ce bouquin, a posé le nom sur les slashers. Donc, qui se définit comme slasher dans la salle ? Qui est slasher ? Voilà. Si vous allez sur LinkedIn, quand vous allez sur LinkedIn, vous tapez slash ou slasher à Paris, vous en avez des centaines qui arrivent. The lady who put this name slasher on your activity, I think you can easily understand my English. Her name is Marcy Albauer. She's with us today. She's here. You can welcome her. L'interview se fera en anglais. Donc si vous parlez parfaitement anglais, même pas parfaitement, parce que Marcy est très compréhensible, ça ne marche pas de problème. Sinon, il y a un QR code qui est là. Et vous pouvez écouter la traduction en direct avec vos écouteurs, et vous écouterez la traduction en direct, les questions de Caroline et les réponses de Marcy. Marcy, I'm really pleased to welcome you in here. We are in touch through LinkedIn for some years now, and you accepted to come here with your husband, Jay. Jay, with your here, and thank you so much. And you have so many things to tell us about slashing. So please welcome Marcy Albauer and Caroline Castet.
Bonjour à tous. Merci beaucoup. Marcy, I'm sorry, I'll start in French. We'll catch up in English in a few minutes. Bonjour à tous. Merci d'être là aujourd'hui. Comme Alain l'a dit, je suis Caroline Castet, rédactrice en chef de Capital. Je suis très heureuse de vous accueillir à cette conférence, ce temps d'échange plutôt qu'une conférence, encore mieux, qui va donner le coup d'envoi de Slash, le temps fort de ce salon organisé en partenariat avec Capital et dédié aux entrepreneurs slashers. Alors évidemment, Alain, qui maîtrise la situation, comme vous l'avez vu, s'est dit mais qui de mieux pour donner ce coup d'envoi, pour introduire ce sujet que la personne à l'origine du concept. Vous l'avez devant vous, c'est Marcy, effectivement, qui est experte des évolutions du monde du travail et qui, il y a presque 20 ans, 18 ans précisément, à partir de la barre oblique, slash en anglais, a inventé le concept de slashing pour désigner ce mode d'entrepreneuriat différent, fondé sur la multi-activité, fondé sur le choix de pratiquer plusieurs métiers en même temps. Donc Marcy, comme Alain vient de vous le dire, nous arrive tout droit des États-Unis. C'est un honneur de l'avoir avec nous et un plaisir. Merci beaucoup d'être avec nous. Bienvenue. Vous allez nous parler aujourd'hui du futur du travail et de la place qu'occuperont dans ce futur plus ou moins proche, non seulement les entrepreneurs slashers, mais les travailleurs, si on peut dire, de plus de 50 ans, puisque c'est un autre des sujets d'étude, des sujets de prédilection de Marcy. Alors, on va effectivement basculer en anglais maintenant. Je pense que vous avez, voilà, comme Alain vous l'a dit, un QR code à activer pour la traduction. Voilà. Mais je pense que vous serez en capacité de suivre sans grande difficulté sinon. Marcy, nice to see you again. Welcome in Paris. Welcome here. Thank you for being here. So maybe to start this conversation, I'd like to go back to your book, which started it all. As Alain said, you wrote in 2007, One Person, Multiple Career, to describe the slashing tendency. So can you tell us what came in your mind? Why did you decide to write this book? What happened?
Thank you, Caroline, and thank you also, Alain, of course, for doing all of this to build on the slash concept and to invite me into this space with all of you who I had to turn around, but could you raise your hands again if you identify as a slasher? It is most of the room, of course. I love it.
You're in the right place.
You're in the right place, and if you're not, my guess is you want to be in some way. So when I wrote that book, I was working as a journalist, much like you, mostly for the New York Times. And I had recently changed careers. I was a lawyer in the first part of my working life. And when I changed careers, I was still holding on to that. For a long time, I was a lawyer turned journalist. You know, I held on to my last identity. I also used my lawyer identity to help me move into this new career. So I think I was tuned into the idea that people were exploring more professional pursuits in the course of a career and layering them on one another. And I started noticing, though, this concept that people were, when you introduce people and ask, what do you do? Many of them were starting to answer with like multiple answers and using the slash openly. And this was happening at every strata of society. It was happening, among people with lots of professional experience, people younger in the workplace, at all kinds of concepts. And in the past, I think we've had this idea. In the US, we had an idea of moonlighting, which is you had a day job, and then you did this thing in the darkness, right, that you didn't talk about too much. Maybe you weren't proud of it, but it helped you pay the bills. That was always a concept. We also always had the Renaissance man, right, the painter and the playwright and, the thinker. And so we had this thing where maybe at the highest level of societies where people didn't need an income, and maybe at the place where people were really struggling, we had that. But I was noticing that this was happening everywhere. This was happening all over the economy, all over different kinds of jobs.
A general tendency.
Yes, a general tendency. And there was a pride associated with it by saying, like, I am not just one thing. Don't box me in. It was a way I was hearing about it. And that we are multifaceted human beings. And what if we allowed ourselves to more openly pursue and claim who we are? So I wrote this one article for the New York Times. And suddenly, everybody started contacting me. I'm a slash too. I relate to this. Like, I'm a rabbi and a stand-up comedian. I'm a chocolatier and an accountant. I'm, telling me their different, identities. And I was like, yeah, there's something here. So I wrote that book, and I went on to do other things in my life. So I got really interested in other kinds of concepts, which we'll get into. But it's so wild to come back and revisit and see what has been happening in France while I went on and did other things.
Thanks for this introduction, Marcy. So that was 18 years ago. You detected the phenomenon, and you wrote this book. What changes did you witness since then?
So many things. I think one thing is the ubiquity of this phenomenon now. I think most young people today don't assume that they will do one thing. I think they grow up now thinking, I don't have to choose in the same way maybe earlier generations had to choose. But I also think there is a sense that all of us, that the precarity of the workplace, I think, is something that's experienced by people in the early stages of their careers, in the middle of their careers when they start wondering, can they hang on? Are they going to be relevant? And in the later stages of careers, I think everyone is thinking, how do I take care of myself? I think even in a place, I know in France, job security used to be something I think in your culture was more protected than what we have in the US. And I'm hearing more and more that people don't feel that sense of security. I think AI is going to further threaten how we all feel we are needed in our jobs. So I now see slashing, and I did then as well, but I think even more so now, of the way of having a balanced portfolio, right? You do some things to balance your risk. And I think more people are going to think of their slash vocations in this way.
So you talk about security, and that's a major point, but there are other points which could lead you to slashing. What would you say, why would you say people slash today? Is it by necessity? Is it by choice? Or is it for some other motivation?
So you have some great new data thanks to this organization. So you now know that there's large parts of people who are slashing by economic necessity, but the majority are still saying it's because of passion, and it's because of this desire to be pulled in different directions, to be attracted to more than one pursuit. So some of us have slashes that are very connected, right? So someone like me, I write, I speak, I coach, all my leadership.
You teach?
I teach. I have taught, very often in the past. Those things are very connected. I think a lot of us have those kind of related slash activities. And then there are people where the slashes have nothing to do with each other. And you could say it's like left brain, right brain, or you're seeking some balance in your life. It's very common, like I know commonly to see like a mathematician or engineer who also has a huge creative life as a designer or a theater person. And I think those kinds of people are really saying, like, I can't be pinned down in this way. And I still think those who are cultivating slashes and realizing that I can have these different streams of my identity are still a big part of, I think, why people would come to gather with others about this. So I do think we're here not just because we know we're going to need multiple ways to earn a living, but wouldn't it be great if those multiple ways also kind of fed your soul or spoke to you in deeper ways and to your values?
So the fact that, as you say, more and more people are interested, are looking for this kind of balance between a secured, a salaried job and a secondary passion job. What does it mean, according to you, as a tendency, as a social tendency?
Yeah, I think we're allowing ourselves to be holistic people and to acknowledge that we all have many aspects of our identity. I think anyone who is a parent or a caregiver or in any kind of committed relationship knows, right, these things are a huge part of our relationship. We can't leave them at home when we go to work. And many of us also have commitments to causes, to things we care about. I was interviewed this morning by a podcaster whose passion is the climate crisis, and he said he can't separate that out from who he is when he shows up to do a podcast. It's going to show up in everything that we do. And I think if we allow ourselves to fully express who we are, some of us will say, I can't do that all in one profession. And I mean, Carolyn, I think you're one of the lucky ones. You seem to really inhabit the journalism role full force.
Yes, I'm a lucky one.
Yes. And I think
I'm among the happy few.
And I think we need people who also say, I'm committed to one thing, or I'm committed to one identity for this period of my life. And I think the other thing I will say I feel really strongly about is life is long, and it has many chapters. And I think your slashes can manifest differently at the different chapters of your life.
That's really nice. So anyway, does it mean, would you say that salaried jobs are bound to become a second choice? Something that you have to do by necessity, not by pleasure, apart from journalists, of course?
And, it's very hard to ever give an answer that is true for all people. But I think we're all finding, I know it all depends on kind of how you find your fulfillment. I know teachers, for example, so many of them who have a salaried job, and it is so core to their identity, they would choose nothing else. Although teachers often need a second job. That is an undercompensated role in our society. At least it is in the US. I don't think it is much better compensated here.
No, probably not.
Right. I think maybe that's true of many who work in healthcare and many who work in areas that have a lot of deep meaning. I do wonder if there is this phenomenon unfolding with kind of general office work, where people are often feeling like maybe a lot of the work that we used to do is going to be done through the assistance of AI. And I think there's an idea floating around in the world of work that If it takes fewer hours for the same amount of output, what will we do with our extra time? Maybe we will end up in a place where those of us who have cultivated other pursuits will have things we really want to do with that extra time, and maybe some of those things will be compensated.
Well, some companies in France, a few, encourage this this extra time to be used in something else. Is it the case in America? Do you have some slashing-friendly companies?
Very employer by employer. I remember, back in the day when Google announced they had this program, the 20% program, where they encouraged their employees to use 20% of their time on their own activity. And that was really a way to inspire creativity. And the idea was, well, if we don't bind people down in the same way, maybe they will be more innovative, not just for themselves, but for us too, right? I think it all comes down to what is the environment that the employer is trying to achieve. And I think some savvy employers have recognized that if we create a more comfortable environment for people to fully express themselves, it won't be threatening, but it will actually be attractive. Maybe it's more attractive than having a nice cafeteria. There's lots of ways you can incentivize employees to value their job. And this one of acknowledging what is already happening, I do think it has changed over time. The side hustle and understanding that many of your employees, they're building an app, they have a catering business, they're a yoga instructor. I think it's becoming much more understood that we are more than our kind of corporate job or salaried job. But it is also something, I know you have laws about this here. In the US, it's far more employer by employer and understanding the policy and the culture of the place that you work and finding a place that fits for you.
So you don't think that's quite encouraging. You don't think that slashing can be perceived by a company as a lack of commitment?
So I think it all depends on how the person handles it. Mm-hmm. So I think if you're really a star performer and you're getting your work done, then I don't think it's going to harm you. But I think if you're phoning it in is an expression we use. If you're just kind of treading water, I think it'll probably have an impact on your ability to succeed in that job.
Okay. So, sorry, you have to move on to your second passion, okay, which is aging economy. People over 50, the way they work, the way they fit in this job market. So, after you worked on slashing, you started working on this aging economy concept. Can you tell us why? Why did the topic interest you, and what kind of intersection did you see with the slashing economy?
Great for making that connection. So after working on the slash idea, I got very interested in, we are an aging society. In the US, we have 11,000 people per day turning 60. And we don't have the uniform retirement policies that you have here. But we also recognize that people are living longer, and therefore many of them needing to work longer or choosing to work longer. But I became very interested in the talent and experience in the aging population, and how could we use that talent and experience for social good, to support the next generation in ways that benefit society. So we designed a society for people who were not going to live that long. And now we're stuck in some of the same models, but if we're healthy and active, we could be contributing for far more longer than prior generations. So that's what got me interested in the work and why I think it's important to recognize. The link to slashing is that as we age, we collect more experiences. And as you age and look back, it is really common to pull those threads through. So, for example, I mentioned that my first career was as a lawyer. And so when I left journalism and I joined this NGO, that was called Encore.org. We took the French word for second acts because we were focusing on that 50-plus population. So I sat on the leadership team of a small NGO, and it was kind of useful that I was a lawyer. I understood the kind of issues that entities like ours dealt with. It made it easier for me to understand partnerships and contracts and human resources issues. And I found that my legal background was coming back to be helpful in some ways. Mm-hmm. So we never lose, even if we move on. I think as we age, often we circle back and look at something. And I'm sitting here today circling back to look at the slash, right? So I think this is a part of what it means to age and stay contributing as you age.
Active. Yeah, contributing. So we hear about that. We hear you when you say that. We understand what you said, that people are aging. They're aging healthier than before, and they still want to contribute, to be active. So are you saying that slashing can be the answer?
Sure, it certainly can be. So I've seen it happen in two ways. So I've seen people who kind of pick up something they used to do, and it can be a source of extra income. It can be a source of mentoring younger people or connecting and partnering with younger people in that space. I've also seen people take up entirely new interests as they age. Maybe something that you didn't have time for when you were younger, and it's still kind of whispering to you in the back of your mind. I've seen many...
Do you have some examples?
I have many examples. So a very good friend of mine who is a triple slash is, I knew her because she was my yoga instructor. Mm-hmm. And then I learned from working with her that she's also an excellent massage therapist. And you could see the connection between those two things. And she's a very sought after massage therapist, but she limits the number of people she works on because she's taking care of her own body, right? So if she did that work 40 hours per week, she would probably be at risk herself. Mm-hmm. So she for years was doing yoga and massage therapy, and in her late 40s, early 50s, she got very interested in psychoanalysis, and she became an analyst, and she now does those three things, and she added the analysis in, I think, in her 50s.
With your friend example, we see the coherence between the three jobs, but you gave me examples when we prepared this conference, but things totally different fields.
Right. So let's say you're a management consultant, an engineer, some kind of, corporate job, and then you have another interest. So you could be, an interior designer or a music coach or something that is feeding like your creative life in a different way. And maybe you didn't want to go down that path and make a whole career about it. Maybe it felt a little like a hobby.
But you don't want to drop it.
But you don't want to drop it, and you want to stay connected to that world.
Okay, I see. So we see how slashing can fit in this aging economy, and you said to me when we prepared again that another key issue for the future of work was how younger and older people could connect and help each other, how two generations could fill the gap and connect to find a way to to inhabit the job market differently.
So the organization that I work with, which used to be called Encore, we changed our name a few years ago to Co-Generate, which is a made-up word to mean the collaboration across generations. And we live in a society right now where there are many generational tensions, and there are also many, many social problems in our world that can only be solved if older and younger people join forces and work on them together. So that's what we do. So we support leaders who are trying to work on cross-generational solutions, but I think one of the most obvious models that we're looking at is leadership itself. So we are led now by two CEOs. Our co-founder and co-CEO is sharing the leadership role with a younger CEO. So they are doing something called co-generational co-leadership. Our view is like the CEO role or the executive director role, that's a big role for one person. Why not have a partner? And what if your partner was younger or older? You would be able to speak to different audiences. You would have the different perspectives. You would also have different networks. So that's a model that is an example. And philosophy of how we run organizations is changing. And if you have two people sharing a role like that, you can negotiate what works best in your particular environment.
Okay, thank you. What would you, now to be on a practical field, what would be your advice to someone who wants to start a multiple career? What could be your tips to people who want to, think of slashing as an opportunity, maybe later or right now?
Yeah.
What would you say?
So one thing I've seen really work well for people is to have something you're comfortable in, where you've achieved like a level of proficiency, where maybe you can, I would say, coast for a little bit, and then put your attention to learning something new. I always say, when you meet the surgeon who's a painter, the surgeon was probably not taking painting classes during med school, right? They're probably waiting to a point where you can actually do your job with some amount of ease And that is a really good time to say there's a window in my life. I also think it's not the time to do it when you have a young toddler at home, right? So think about where you have an opening in your life that you say, I have space now to dedicate myself to something new, but also maybe I have something that gives me security, confidence, so that in another part of my life, I'm taking more risk.
Taking more risks, that's it.
Yeah.
And how do you keep a balance, a personal balance, in terms of health,
Right.
of time, everything? How do you keep a balance between your various careers?
Two things I would say are really important. One is most of the slash people I know, they're not workaholics, actually. They've actually drawn some reasonable boundaries. So this example of my friend who is the triple slash, she's a really good example. Like, she has a limit on how much she will do in any one sphere. And that natural limit also makes her kind of in demand, right? When you say, I'm only seeing this number of clients, or I think that could be a very good marketing strategy too. Everybody wants to go to the person who only has a certain amount of slots open. But it also helps you to say, I'm not going to let myself get burned out from any one activity, because you do have to put up some boundaries for yourself, or else I do think you can run into overload. The other, yeah?
Sorry. So that's a risk when you talk about passion careers. That's a risk.
Of course, it's a
burnout.
Yeah, I think anyone who loves what they do, there is a risk of overwork, or kind of work centrism is the new word that I like about it. I think the other tip that I would say is try to think about activities that pair well together. That could be, there's this concept of like the anchor and the orbiter. So the anchor is often something that doesn't have a lot of flexibility. You need to do it in a specific place. You need to do it maybe in partnership with other people. It's less flexible. And if you have something like that in your life, it pairs well with something you can do in your free time. Maybe you can do it anywhere. You could do it virtually. You could do it with minimal equipment. You could do it when you travel. So I think this idea of maybe some things that pair well literally logistically, and then maybe things that pair well psychically. So are you kind of nurturing different ways of thinking, using your mind, using your hands, there's lots of ways to think about balance.
Thanks a lot, Marcy. On a deux minutes, je pense, pour prendre quelques questions. Je suis sûre qu'il y en a. C'est le moment. Marcy repart demain. Donc c'est last chance. Voilà.
Yeah. When you say you're a slasher, can you reveal what your slashes are?
Okay, yeah. I changed my life completely, so I belong to all the categories you're mentioning, beyond 50, slashing, and yeah. So what I do now, on one side, I'm a life coach, specialized in transitions, and I'm a yoga instructor, active, and I also have a rent a place. So I have 3 activities.
Yeah.
But what I wanted to ask you is, in your experience, I found that, and I changed my life completely. Before I was a negotiator, working internationally. Yeah. And I think there's 2 questions. There's sometimes, because you mentioned a lot that we have to go for our passion, but then you go quite quickly in the area of income. Mm-hmm. Like at the beginning, I think it's also an aspect we should mention. Like if you change completely your life, there might be a moment where you're like, you get dizzy because your income might drop.
Yeah.
And, France is a highly taxed country, so this is a very an issue here for us. So when you change, you might have that. I wanted to have your opinion on this. And the other thing is also the opinion of people. Like I had the feeling sometimes if you come in a society and people always said, oh, what are you doing? And so you start saying what you used to do before, right? That sounds good because you're known, you have a structure. But now I changed everything. Now I'm doing yoga, I'm coaching, and you hear the face just drops oh. And I just wanted to have your opinion on this. If this is evolving, because I've experienced this in France, and I'm like, oh, okay, so I wanted to ask you this.
I hear a question like that, and I said, yep, the world is the same. Okay. So on the income, that's why I told the story about when I transitioned from the law. I think it is really very common when we do a transition that we're going to have an income dip. And it's another reason why those who are lucky enough to have a salaried job, often there is a period where you could be building up your slash pursuit. And the survey that was done in accordance with this conference talked about the number of people, high number of people, who are looking at the slash moment as a way to get ready to break free but you have this like support in the mean term. So I think it's really important to think about how you're going to manage a transition. In terms of what people think and perception, I think that's all about yourself as much as everybody else. So I think if you are confident that what you're doing is a better match for your values and where you are at this stage of your life and your own priorities, I think then you'd be surprised. I mean, as someone who left the corporate world and left the world of the law, the lawyers are the ones who envy me the most. So when being a former lawyer was a pretty good slash identity for a long time, inspired a lot of other lawyers to say maybe I could leave that behind, even though we invest a lot in a career like that. So I think it's really important to think about in the state of the world right now, what do you think the world needs of you, and what do you feel excited to try to do in these moments?
Merci beaucoup. Je pense qu'on va devoir en rester là, mais Marcy ne s'éloigne pas. Un grand merci à tous d'avoir suivi cette conférence, cet échange. Un grand merci à vous, Marcy, d'être venue partager vos retours d'expérience, vos apprentissages. Trust me. Thank you. Ce n'est qu'un début, cette conférence n'est qu'un début, puisque dans une demi-heure commence ici même nos 3 conférences slash, animées par une autre experte du sujet, bien française celle-ci, Marielle Barbe, qu'on peut d'ores et déjà applaudir, et qui est auteure de Profession Slasher. Je vous laisse en de très bonnes mains. Merci beaucoup, bon après-midi sur le salon.